Before I get started this morning, I want to give you a quick announcement. We need your help with something this week. On our website, if you go to our website this week, you'll see a link on there to take a satisfaction survey. I'm calling it the Church Satisfaction Survey. Go to our website. We need you to fill that out because we want to make sure you're happy with what's going on here. We want you to rate our music and the seats you sit in and the parking lot experience out there and whether or not you're getting what you want out of the messages I'm teaching. So we want to make sure we do this church satisfaction survey. So we need your help. Go there to our website, click on the link, and take that survey. You'll be of great help to us. I'm catching a couple of you on your phones right now. You're looking to see if this is true. Others of you are going, no, we're not doing that. You know we're not doing that, right? Everybody know that? We're really not doing that. Yes? No? Ha ha ha. Where am I going with this? Here's the deal. That's the type of world we live in today, isn't it? There's a survey for everything. I can't remember the last time I got a receipt from either a gas station or a grocery store, and it says, go to our website and take our customer service satisfaction survey. We want to know what you think, right? That's the type of world we live in today. And here's the deal. We have taken this to heart, and now, if I'm not satisfied with my steak, what do? I send it back and get a new one. That's how we live our life. If I don't like the service that I'm getting, what do? I ask to talk to the manager or the supervisor or somebody that I know will get the job done. If we don't like what's going on in the city of Barberton or how the community foundation is spending its money, what do? We write a letter to the Barberton Herald so it shows up on the complaints page of the newspaper. That's what I call it anyway, But that's how we live society today. It's all about what I want and what I need and how I'm being satisfied. And unfortunately, I think the truth is a lot of us bring this into our church environment. And a lot of us think, well, the church is all about what I want and what I need, and they should be listening to what I want out of the worship service or my Sunday school class or whatever is going on out there. And so we bring these ideas in here that I should be served. The church should serve me and what I want and my desires. And we want to make sure that we're noticed and served properly, and that our opinions are the most important, and that we should cater to each and every person's individual preferences. And I think the question should not be, am I being served? The question should be, am I serving? That's the question. I want to go back a couple thousand years ago to a quiet upper room around a dinner table. Jesus has gathered the 12 around this dinner table on a Thursday evening, and they're there to celebrate the Passover meal. Great intimate time. And it's just a matter of hours that Jesus is going to be arrested and tried and even put to death. Now, an argument has been brewing among the 12, and this is an argument that surfaces every now and then. If you read the story, you've seen this argument a few times among the disciples, and they're not arguing about who gets to sit where around the dinner table. They're arguing about whose seat is the best. Know where I'm going with this? In other words, who is the greatest among the apostles? Which of the 12 is the best, the most preferred, the most important? My kids and I, we joke around all the time. Who's your favorite? You ever play that game? That's a dangerous game because if they actually answer, whoa, it's not good in the house. But that's what these disciples are doing right now. They're sitting around going, I'm the favorite. No, I'm the favorite. No, you were the favorite. No, it's got to be him. And it just goes on. And Jesus, and over his 3-year period with his disciples, has seen this argument 3 times at least. And he knows that this particular time, it's not a time for sermons. It's not a time to sit down with his apostles and say, okay, guys, gather in. I'm going to give you a speech about this. He's already given them the speech. We find it in Mark chapter 10, and Jesus says this about who wants to be the greatest. He says in Mark chapter 10, instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. Whoever wants to be first must be a slave. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to what? Serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. Now, it didn't sink in with the apostles, with the disciples. It just didn't sink into their thick skulls that this is how the kingdom of heaven is really like. And maybe it doesn't sink in for us, because I don't know that times are that much different than they were back then. You know, it's not just how life works, because if you want to be first in this life, you got to claw and kick and grab your way to get to the top. You know, you don't turn the other cheek, you even the score. You don't pray for your enemies, you know, you find a way to defeat them. This is how we live. We elbow and we cut our way to the front of the line, because in our world and in the apostles' world back then, the first are first. The first are first. Plain and simple. The first are first, and that's how it is. And so to live like this, how Jesus wants, because he taught the first will be what? And the last will be, well, that's totally upside down. That doesn't make sense. The disciples had forgotten those words, yet once again, as they're gathered in this upper room. You might remember this from a couple years ago in the fall of 2012. A high school football game took place in Ohio between St. Clairsville and Richmond Edison. Now, St. Clairsville, they dominated the game the whole time. I mean, they were just touchdown after touchdown, and they were on their way to victory. And then something special happened toward the end of the game. They had a star player on their team named Michael Ferns. Michael Ferns was a 6'3", 235-pound, 4-star recruit to that school up north. You know where I'm talking about? Yeah, thank you, Michigan. Any Michigan fans in here? I guess you're welcome here too. That's okay. I'm a Buckeyes fan. Just wanted to say that, point that out. But anyway, this kid was a 4-star recruit to Michigan, and he gets the ball, and he runs the ball 52 yards down the sideline, the left sideline. And when he gets to the end zone line marker, he steps out of bounds at the 1. Now, the refs watching this all unfold, they immediately signal touchdown. I mean, why wouldn't he have gone into the end zone? It just makes sense. Nobody was around him. He would have just, ball would have crossed. So the refs signal touchdown, and Michael Ferns jumps up and he's like, no touchdown. I didn't score. I didn't cross the marker. No way. And he's going on and on. No touchdown. And the refs are like, whoa, this is weird. A high school athlete denying that he scored a touchdown? What's up with that? This doesn't make sense. Well, reluctantly, the refs reverse the call. No touchdown, ball at the 1. So the team takes the ball then at the 1 to run the next play, and a freshman on the team named Logan Thompson was called into the game. Now, Logan Thompson had just lost his dad 2 days ago before this game to a stroke, suffered a stroke and died. And Thompson, all season long, never got to carry the ball. He's a freshman. Never got to carry the ball, never scored a touchdown. He just kind of sat on the sidelines and watched the game. Michael Ferns stepped out of the way and put the ball into Logan Thompson's hands to score the touchdown. And what's even cooler is that Michael Ferns acted as a blocker and got the guys out of the way so that Logan could score that touchdown. Isn't that cool? They both celebrate after the game to their victory, and they hug each other, and it's a great moment. We go, wow, that is so cool. And we think, man, that's the way life is supposed to be lived. This is how life is meant to be lived. Isn't that great? And we feel so good, but if we're really honest, how many of us just kind of like to step out of the way and put the ball in somebody else's hands? Nah. I want to be the one carrying the ball. I want to be the one scoring the touchdown. I think we're concerned about being number one and being the greatest and becoming the most important person in the room, that we step on everybody else to get there. And we're inspired by stories like that, but we're hard-pressed, I think, a lot of times to write one of our own, aren't we? It's very hard to do. Well, here's Jesus in the upper room, and instead of preaching another sermon and giving them a speech, Jesus decides to show his disciples what his kingdom is like. So in John chapter 13, we read, "So he got up from the meal, he took off his outer clothing and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with a towel that he had wrapped around his waist." The room grows quiet and still as the status-seeking disciples quietly watch the Creator of the world, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, the Son of God, stoop down, lower himself to the status of a slave, the lowest of lows, and wash their dirty, smelly feet. Aside from a little banter with Peter, Jesus really doesn't say much. He just goes about his business and washes his disciples' feet. But what he has to say at the end of all this reverberates in the minds of the disciples like an echo in the Grand Canyon. In John 13, 14 through 17, Jesus says, "Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you should also wash each other's feet." You should wash each other's feet. "I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. I tell you the truth, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be" what? "Blessed if you do them." And some of you sit there and you're probably thinking to yourself, how do you serve a husband? How do you serve a husband who doesn't treat me with respect? How do you serve a wife who never has a kind word to say about you? How do you serve a child that never says thank you or isn't respectful of you? How do you serve a father who belittles you? How do you serve a coworker who stabs you in the back all the time? How do you serve a friend who constantly mooches off of you and never pays you back? How do you serve these types of people? I think one of the hardest things to do in this world is to serve someone that you know you're not going to get anything back from. You like to be paid back. I'm going to have a dinner for this person because I know in return they're going to have a dinner for me. But to serve those that can't pay you back, that's a little bit different. That's hard to do. So what do? I think we neatly fold up our towels, our serving towels, and we hide them in a cabinet somewhere and say, you know what, I'm done. I'm done serving. No more of that. Let somebody else do it. I can't do it anymore. Jesus didn't come to be served. He came to what? He came to serve. He didn't come to be paid back. He came to do the paying. He didn't come to be noticed, but he came to draw attention to others. He didn't come to get a raise, but to give back to everyone he met. He didn't come to be great or to be recognized or to be rewarded or to be elected to a high position or to be crowned. Jesus came to serve. Jesus came to serve. And you think about the people, the type of people he served. Just in his close group of friends, he served people like Peter. Peter denied who Jesus was. He served people like Thomas. You remember Thomas? I doubt he's alive. Thomas the doubter. He served people like Judas. Judas betrayed Jesus. Yet Jesus continued to serve him. Jesus came to serve people like that. Jesus came to serve you and me. And Jesus calls us to get our towels out of the drawer and start serving people around us. He called us to do the same thing. Jesus washes the disciples' feet, and after he's done, they take their places back at the table, and Jesus serves them a meal. He takes the bread, he breaks it, and he gives thanks, and he passes it out to his disciples. And then he takes the cup, and he gives thanks, and he passes that out to his disciples. We know this meal as what? the Last Supper, communion, Lord's Supper. And they share this intimate moment with Jesus Christ. And I think a lot of times when we start to gather around this table up here, many of us come into this room and we think, man, I'm just not worthy enough to partake of this. I'm not worthy enough to take this Lord's Supper and to share in the body and blood of Jesus Christ. And so we sit back and we think, like Peter, you shouldn't be washing my feet, Jesus. I should be washing yours. I'm not good enough to partake. Well, we're going to do something a little bit differently this morning. I want to invite my servers to come up and gather around the table here. Go ahead and come on up and get ready and undo your lids and all that and pass them out. And while they're doing that, here's what's going to happen. We're going to take communion now. We'll take up offering after that. And then I'll come back to my message. We'll finish it out after that. But I want you to think about that upper room experience. The disciples have gathered around this table to take of the Lord's Supper, and I wonder how many of them felt unworthy. How many of us come into this room feeling unworthy? And Tony Campalo shares a story of a communion experience. At 7 years old, Tony is sitting with his family at church, and the preacher's going on about how, that the unworthy deserve Jesus' love and mercy and grace. And it's a great message, and it comes time for communion. And the whole time, Tony had noticed this woman sitting in front of him, this young lady in the next pew in front of him, crying and sobbing the whole time and shaking her head no, as if I'm not worthy of Jesus' love and mercy and grace. And when the time came for communion, the tray's coming down the aisle, and Tony realizes, I don't think she's going to take communion. She just doesn't feel worthy. And at that moment, Tony's dad leans forward and says to the young lady, "Take it, girl. Take it, girl. This was meant for you. This was meant for you. Do you hear me? This was meant for you." And the young lady nods and reluctantly takes the Lord's Supper, still feeling unworthy of his grace. And I think if Jesus were here today, he would challenge us, number one, that we need to serve each other. But number two, he would say to you, take it. Take my mercy, take my grace, receive that. This was meant for you. Do you hear me? This was meant for you. When they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. Many of you know what happens next. Jesus and his disciples, they enter the Garden of Gethsemane, and Jesus becomes overwhelmed with sorrow. The Bible says to the point of death. Jesus knows what's about to happen next. In less than 24 hours, he's going to be betrayed, arrested, tried, and then crucified. And so for Jesus, the hour of darkness is fast approaching. And what does Jesus do? Jesus takes his three closest friends, Peter, James, and John, and they go together kind of off into a distance. Then they get to a certain point, and Jesus says, okay, you three, you wait here, you watch and pray. And we see Jesus go off by himself, and he falls to his knees, and he buries his face into the ground, and he cries out, God, Father, Dad, I don't want to die. I don't want to die. Will you take this cup away from me? Let this cup pass from me. And somewhere he finds the strength, but not as I will, as you will. And I wonder if God came back to Jesus in a voice and maybe reminded Jesus of his very own words in John chapter 14 and verse 6. Maybe God whispered to Jesus, you are the way. You're the only way. You're the only one that can sacrifice, make the sacrifice to pay for everybody's sins, to wipe the slate clean. We've been building this up all these years now. You're the only way, Jesus. And suddenly the Roman soldiers show up, and a familiar face emerges from out of the crowd. Judas approaches the Savior of the world, Jesus, and he kisses him on his cheek, the signal that this was the man to be handed over. And Jesus, I like this, he kind of takes advantage of the setting. And he calls out the cowardice of the teachers of the law, of the religious leaders. He calls out their cowardice for their nighttime vigilante actions. In Luke chapter 22, Jesus says this. He says to the chief priests, the officers of the temple guard, the elders who had come for him. This whole crowd is standing there, torches in their hands. You can see their faces lit up by the torches and maybe silhouettes here and there. And Jesus says this, am I leading a rebellion that you've come at me with swords and clubs? Every day I was with you in the temple courts, and you didn't lay a hand on me. And here's the catch, but this is your hour when darkness reigns. This is your hour when darkness reigns. You know, how many of us were so apt to do things in the dark? We're so apt to do these things in the dark because we don't want to be seen doing them. We would do things that we never considered doing in the light, and that's what the Roman soldiers have done. It's dark time. Nobody really knows what's going on. We think we can keep it from others, maybe even from God, but the truth is, we can't hide our actions. God knows. Well, the disciples, they scatter. They're gone. The soldiers, they lead Jesus away, and later on, Peter denies Jesus, even knowing who Jesus was 3 times. And here they ship Jesus from person to person throughout the entire night. They start with Annas. Annas says, I don't want to have anything to do with them. So he ships him to Caiaphas. Caiaphas says, no, send him to Pilate. They send him to Pilate, and Pilate says, I don't want to do anything with this guy. So they send him to King Herod. And Herod says, well, he's not my problem. So King Herod ships him back to Pilate. And at first, we start reading about Pilate, and we think, oh, Pilate's coming to Jesus' rescue here. And Pilate tells the crowd, this guy hasn't done anything deserving of death. He's got these little things going on. I mean, it's really not that big a deal. What are you guys doing here? And despite that, the crowd has gathered together as one voice now, led by the religious leaders against Jesus. And they don't want just a slap on the wrist. They're out for blood. And man, did they get it. They take Jesus out back, they tie him to a post, and they scourge him with a whip that just shreds the skin off his back. And historians would say 2/3 of the people going through this type of scourging would never survive. Just didn't make it. They would die in the scourging process, never make it to the crucifixion part. Had Jesus died in the scourging process, think about this. How many prophecies would have gone unfulfilled? Jesus was a carpenter. He was a strong man. Jesus was the Son of God. He was going to go through with this. The Bible tells us in a very short phrase what happens next. 3 short words. They crucified him. They crucified him. Didn't need any elaboration. They knew what that meant back then in the Bible times. And we know what it is today. They took Jesus, they laid him on a cross, they pounded 6-inch nails, spikes through his hands and feet, and they raised him up in his shame for everyone to see. Darkness covers the land. At noon, darkness covers the land. And I want you to see something here. Here's the scene on Good Friday as described by Josephus, a historian back then. Josephus estimates around 2 million people were pouring into the city of Jerusalem. They're crowding into the city that day. Why? Because it's Passover. They're there to celebrate this Passover holiday. And so people are coming from everywhere into the city. And there's an eeriness. You think about it, at noon, the sky gets dark. It's dark. There's an eeriness in the city because it's the middle of the day. It's supposed to be light outside. And tons of Jewish pilgrims have come into town to be in Jerusalem for this Passover. So there's this hustle and bustle. And they don't realize what time it is because it's dark. The darkness had covered the land. And all of a sudden, at 3 o'clock, the people would hear a familiar sound. Back then, during Passover week, the shofar would blow at 12 o'clock, at 3 o'clock, to signify to the people that a sacrifice was being made. Here's the cool part. What most of them didn't realize was the sacrifice that was being made that day when the shofar blew was outside the city. Not inside, not in the temple, but outside the city. Jesus dying on a cross. The shofar blows. Jesus dies. And the temple veil is torn in two from top to bottom. Jesus didn't come to be served, but to serve. And he didn't just come to serve us. Jesus came to save and to give his life as a ransom for many. And just to make certain that you don't somehow miss the significance of this, Jesus' final phrase as he breathes his last is what? It is finished. It is finished. Now, what does that mean? The Greek word simply means debt has been paid. Wouldn't it be great if you got a letter in the mail from your credit card company? Psst, finished. Student loan, paid off. Car loan, paid. All your debt, paid off. Can you imagine the sense of relief you would feel? Even greater than that, the debt that you owe because of your sin and the unworthiness you feel, guess what? Paid off. Do you feel relief from that? Your debt has been paid. God finally has provided a way for man's sin to be forgiven and paid for once and for all, and this is it. While the shofar is blowing, the Son of God is dying, the temple veil is being torn in two from top to bottom, signifying that we can have access to God the Father through Jesus, his Son. Finally, after all this time, God came and lives among us right here in our hearts. We take him with us wherever we go. Finally. October 16th, 1987, some of you may remember this. Northwest Airlines Flight 225 crashes on takeoff in Detroit, Michigan. It killed 155 passengers on board. One survivor, 4-year-old Cecilia. She was found walking among the wreckage of the airplane, totally unhurt. Boggles the mind. Just prior to the crash, though, Cecilia's mother, Paula, unbuckled her seatbelt and knelt in front of Cecilia and wrapped her arms around her daughter. Paula took the devastation of the crash, and Cecilia lived. Paula took the fall for the daughter she loved. God sent his son, Jesus, and he wrapped his arms around you. He took the horrible fall with all its sin so that in the midst of the wreckage of this world, we might live. God is holy. God is love. Our merits don't enhance God's love. We can't do anything to enhance what God is doing and loving, how he's loving us, and our mistakes don't diminish it. There's nothing we can do to take his love away. We're going to end our service a little bit differently today, and I've asked Mitch to come and sing an invitation song. This is a love song from Jesus to you. So we're not going to stand, we're not going to sing. I just want you to sit and reflect on the words. They'll be on the screen. Reflect on the words that Jesus is writing to you. I've done everything. I've done all I can just to be with you. Do you want to be with him? Do you really want to live with Jesus in your heart and to live life to please him and to figure out how to do this better and better every day? I know I do. Because it's not easy living in this world trying to live for Jesus, but I want to figure out how to do it better and better. And some of you may be sitting here this morning, maybe you haven't received his love and his grace and his mercy, and you're just going, I'm just not worthy. Guess what? He did this for you. So if you haven't given your life to Jesus, now's the time. I want to ask our elders if you guys would come up to the front as well. If anybody would happen to come forward, we want to pray with you. We want to invite you into a relationship with Jesus Christ and take you upstairs. Maybe we can baptize you today or sometime this week and say, hey, this is it. I'm following Jesus, and this is how it's going to be. So if you're feeling moved this morning to give your life to Jesus Christ, come forward as Mitch sings this song and give your life to Jesus. Now's the time to receive it. We're going to end this chapter today in darkness. I know it's kind of bleak, but Jesus has died. He's been buried in a tomb, and he's done this for you.